Cowboy took 5 stabs for the Apache woman, but when he woke up, 3 Apache women were standing. The sun was slowly setting over the vast Arizona desert, casting long, orange shadows across the endless stretches of sand and sparse scrub. The air was dry, and the heat of the day still lingered, making the desert feel alive yet unforgiving. In the distance, a lone figure rode steadily along a narrow trail, the sound of hooves crunching softly on the dry earth echoing across the empty landscape. This was Jake Carter, a cowboy whose reputation had grown far and wide, not just for his skill with a gun or his courage, but for his unwavering sense of justice. Many knew him as a man who would ride into danger when others hesitated, and he had saved lives that others would have abandoned. Yet despite his fame, Jake often preferred the solitude of the open desert, feeling more at home with the wind, the sun, and the land than in any town or settlement. Jake had been traveling for several days without seeing another soul. The trail he followed was faint, barely visible among the desert sands, but Jake's experience allowed him to read the land like a book. Every rock, every scrub, every animal track told him a story. He noticed signs of recent activity, broken branches, disturbed sand, footprints, indicating that someone had passed this way not long ago. His instincts, honed from years of living in the wild, warned him that the trail was not empty and that danger could be near. As he rounded a small rise, he heard a faint cry carried by the wind. It was soft but urgent, filled with fear. Jake paused, his horse's ears twitching, and he listened carefully. There it was again, a woman's voice calling for help. Without a second thought, Jake urged his horse forward, following the sound across the uneven terrain. The desert was harsh, but Jake had faced it many times before. He rode with a purpose, driven by the knowledge that someone in trouble might not survive long without help. Soon he came upon a small clearing where the source of the cries became clear. A young Apache woman was struggling against 3 rough-looking men. They were armed and aggressive, clearly intent on harming her. She tried to fight back, but she was outnumbered and overpowered. Her clothing was torn, her hair disheveled, and her face was streaked with dirt and tears. Despite her fear, there was a fire in her eyes, a refusal to give up even in the face of danger. Jake's heart went out to her, but he knew action was needed immediately. Without hesitation, he drew his revolver, the metal glinting in the fading sunlight. "Hey, leave her alone," he shouted, his voice cutting through the tense air. The men turned, startled by the sudden presence of a stranger. Jake did not wait. He fired a warning shot into the ground, sending up a small cloud of dust. The bandits hesitated, giving the young woman a brief moment to try to escape, but the desert was not forgiving, and she had nowhere safe to run. The struggle became chaotic. Jake fought with everything he had, using both his revolver and his fists. The bandits were rough and desperate, and despite his experience, he was quickly overwhelmed. In the struggle, one of the men drew a knife, and in the frenzy, it found its mark. Jake felt a sharp pain as the blade cut deep into his side. He gritted his teeth and continued fighting, refusing to give up. Another stab, then another, and soon he realized he had been struck 5 times. Each wound was painful, weakening him, but he forced himself to stay on his feet, determined to protect the young woman at all costs. The Apache woman, seeing Jake's bravery, found renewed courage. She grabbed a small stick from the ground and swung it with all her strength at one of the bandits, striking him across the arm. He staggered back, giving Jake the opening he needed. With a final push, he overpowered the leader of the 3 men, knocking the weapon from his hand. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader defeated, turned and ran into the desert, disappearing into the fading light. Jake's body trembled from the effort and the pain. He had saved the young woman, but his injuries were severe. He fell to the ground, feeling the hot sand beneath him and the blood soaking his shirt. The young woman ran to his side, her eyes wide with worry. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake tried to speak, but the dryness of his mouth and the sharp pain in his side made it almost impossible. He managed a weak nod, trying to reassure her, though he knew he needed help fast. The young woman, whose name he soon learned was Naeli, acted quickly. She pulled a piece of cloth from her clothing and pressed it against his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. Her hands were steady, trained by years of helping her family and community in times of need. Despite her youth, there was a wisdom in her movements, a calm determination that gave Jake hope. "You'll be okay," she said firmly. "We'll get you to a safe place." Naeli led Jake to a small, hidden cave nearby. It was barely visible from the main trail, concealed by rocks and desert scrub. Inside, the cave was cool, a welcome relief from the heat outside. Naeli and a few of her companions, who soon appeared to help, laid Jake down gently. They used herbs and water to clean his wounds and bandage them as best they could. Jake was in immense pain, but he felt a strange sense of gratitude. These women, strangers to him just hours ago, were now saving his life with care and courage. As the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness settled over the desert, Jake drifted in and out of consciousness. He felt the exhaustion of the day weighing on him, the pain from his wounds, and the strange mixture of fear and relief. Yet even in this weakened state, he observed the women around him. There was Ahioka, Naeli's older sister, who moved with quiet strength, checking every bandage and making sure he was stable. And there was Zitkala, a younger woman watching him carefully, alert to any sound or movement outside the cave. They were protective, resourceful, and brave, a trio of women whose presence was both reassuring and humbling. Jake's thoughts wandered as he struggled to stay awake. He reflected on the events that had brought him here, on the violence of the bandits, and on the courage of the woman he had saved. He realized that this was not just another day in the desert. Something had shifted in his understanding of the land and its people. The desert was not merely a place of isolation or danger. It was a place of hidden strength, of courage and survival, of connections forged in the face of adversity. Night fully settled in, and the stars above the desert began to shine. Jake, though weak, felt a strange peace. He was surrounded by people who had risked their lives to save him, and despite the pain, he felt a connection that was rare in his solitary life. Naeli sat close by, her presence comforting, while Ahioka and Zitkala kept watch at the cave's entrance. Jake drifted into sleep, his mind filled with thoughts of the day's events, the bravery of the women, and the unpredictable turns of life in the desert. He did not know what the next day would bring. He did not know if the bandits would return or if he would fully recover from his wounds. But as he lay there, resting under the quiet protection of the 3 Apache women, Jake felt a sense of hope he had not known in a long time. The desert, harsh as it was, had also shown him something remarkable. That courage could be found in unexpected places, that life could surprise even the most seasoned traveler, and that sometimes the most unlikely alliances could become the strongest bonds of all. And so, under the vast sky filled with stars, Jake Carter, the lone cowboy, began the long journey of recovery, surrounded by people who had become more than strangers. They had become his protectors, his teachers, and perhaps, in ways he could not yet understand, his friends. The story of the night he took 5 stabs to save a young Apache woman was only the beginning of a larger tale, one that would test courage, trust, and the strength of the human spirit in the days to come. When Jake woke up the next morning, the desert sun was already high in the sky, spilling light into the small cave where he had been brought. His body ached, and every movement reminded him of the 5 deep wounds he had suffered the day before. He tried to sit up, but a wave of pain forced him back down. Through blurry vision, he noticed something unusual. 3 women were standing nearby, watching him carefully. Naeli, the young woman he had saved, was closest to him, her dark eyes filled with concern. Ahioka, her older sister, stood slightly behind her, strong and composed, scanning the cave's entrance for any signs of danger. And Zitkala, the youngest of the three, remained alert, her posture tense, as though she could detect danger before it arrived. Jake blinked several times, trying to understand the situation. He had expected to wake alone, to find the harsh desert around him and no one to assist. But seeing the three women there made him realize that he was far from alone. They had carried him to this hidden refuge, using their knowledge of the land to move silently and avoid the bandits who had attacked him. Jake's mind raced with gratitude and curiosity. Who were these women? How had they learned to survive so well in such a dangerous place? And why had they risked themselves for a stranger? Naomi stepped closer, her hands folded respectfully in front of her. "You are awake," she said softly. "We were worried. You were badly hurt. If you move too quickly, it will make your wounds worse." Her voice had a calm authority that made Jake trust her words, even though he barely knew her. He tried to speak, but only a weak groan escaped his lips. Naomi smiled faintly and nodded, understanding that he could not yet answer. Over the next few hours, Jake slowly regained enough strength to sit up and take in his surroundings. The cave was small but well hidden. Rocks and desert scrub concealed its entrance, and inside it was surprisingly cool. The women had arranged a small bedding area for him using blankets and animal hides. There was a shallow bowl of water and a small assortment of herbs laid out neatly on a flat stone. Jake realized that these women were not just protecting him, they were taking care of him with knowledge and skill. Ahioka, noticing Jake's observation, explained, "These herbs will help your wounds heal faster. They will prevent infection. We must be careful, the desert is harsh and injuries can become dangerous quickly." Her tone was calm but firm. She moved with purpose, tending to each bandage and checking the deep cuts that ran across his torso and arms. Jake watched in awe. In all his years traveling alone, he had never seen such careful attention to someone's injuries, especially from someone so young. Zitkala approached Jake cautiously, her eyes scanning him for any sign of pain or distress. She handed him a cup of water, which he drank slowly, savoring the cool liquid. "You were very brave yesterday," she said quietly. "Most men would have run. You did not." Jake nodded weakly, feeling both humbled and embarrassed by the praise. Bravery, he thought, was not about recognition. It was about doing what had to be done, no matter the risk. As the morning passed, Jake began to learn more about the women. Naomi told him that she had been captured once by rival bandits who had threatened her village. She had escaped, but the memory of that danger remained vivid. Ahioka, the eldest sister, had studied traditional medicine with their mother and had saved many lives in their community. Zitkala, though the youngest, was skilled in tracking and survival, able to move through the desert without leaving a trace. Together, they formed a team that had survived many hardships, relying on each other's strengths and their intimate knowledge of the desert. Despite his injuries, Jake could not help but feel a growing respect for them. These women, whom many outsiders might underestimate, possessed courage, intelligence, and skill that rivaled anyone he had met in his travels. He realized that he had underestimated the strength of those who lived closely with the land. The desert was not just a place of danger, it was a teacher, shaping those who lived within it into resourceful and resilient people. As the day wore on, Jake's mind began to clear. He could feel the weight of the previous day's events lifting slightly, replaced by a deep curiosity about the women who had saved his life. He wanted to know more about their lives, their struggles, and the desert that had made them so strong. He tried to ask Naomi about her village, but she only smiled softly. "We will tell you in time," she said. "For now, rest. You need strength if you are to survive the desert." Jake nodded, understanding that patience was necessary. The desert had taught him that rushing often led to mistakes. As evening approached, The three women prepared a small meal using dried meat and wild herbs. The scent of food filled the cave, and Jake felt a pang of hunger that reminded him how weak he still was. They ate together, quietly at first, then gradually sharing stories of survival. Naeli spoke of the dangers that lurked in the desert, the unpredictable storms, the wild animals, and the bandits who preyed on travelers. Ahioka described the plants and herbs that could heal wounds and cure illness, showing Jake how knowledge passed down through generations could save lives. Zitkala shared tales of her adventures in tracking and finding water, showing how even the youngest could contribute to the survival of the group. Jake listened intently, realizing that these women were not only brave but wise. Their knowledge of the desert was profound, and their ability to work together had saved his life. For the first time, he saw the value of relying on others, rather than facing danger alone. Trust, he realized, was just as important as skill or courage. As night fell and the stars emerged in the sky, Jake felt a sense of peace he had not known for many years. The pain in his body was still present, but it was balanced by a growing appreciation for the women who had saved him. He watched as Naeli sat near the cave entrance, her eyes reflecting the light of the fire outside. Ahioka and Zitkala remained vigilant, keeping watch for any sign of danger. In that moment, Jake understood something profound. The desert, though harsh and unforgiving, was also a place where courage, intelligence, and trust could flourish. Sleep came slowly for Jake that night. His body was exhausted, but his mind was active, processing the events of the day. He thought about the bandits, the young woman he had saved, and the three remarkable women who now protected him. He realized that his journey through the desert was no longer just about traveling or adventure. It had become a journey of learning, trust, and discovery. The women had taught him a valuable lesson. Survival was not about strength alone, but about understanding, cooperation, and the willingness to accept help when needed. In the quiet hours of the night, Jake made a silent promise to himself. He would recover, and when he did, he would honor the courage and wisdom of the women who had saved him. He would listen to their stories, learn from their knowledge, and ensure that their bravery was respected. For the first time in many years, he felt that he was not alone in the vast desert. He had allies, teachers, and friends. The desert had brought them together, and he knew that their bond, forged through courage and compassion, would be stronger than any danger that lay ahead. By the time dawn broke, painting the desert in shades of gold and pink, Jake was feeling stronger. The wounds still ached, but he could sit up without as much difficulty. Naeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala were already awake, preparing for the day. They moved with quiet efficiency, showing him once again that life in the desert required constant awareness and care. Jake watched them, feeling a mix of admiration and humility. These women, who might have seemed fragile to an outsider, were in reality powerful, resourceful, and fearless. As the morning sun climbed higher, Jake realized that his journey was only beginning. He had survived the attacks of the bandits, but the desert was far from safe. There were challenges ahead, lessons to be learned, and dangers to face. Yet, with the guidance and protection of Naeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala, he felt prepared for whatever lay ahead. The bond formed in the cave, born out of courage, trust, and mutual respect, was stronger than any weapon, and it would guide him through the trials to come. And so, as Jake Carter, the lone cowboy, rested and regained his strength, he began to see the desert not just as a land of danger, but as a place of growth, learning, and unexpected friendship. The three Apache women had not only saved his life, they had shown him a new way to see the world, and he knew that he would carry their lessons with him for the rest of his journey. As the desert sun began to dip toward the horizon, the small cave where Jake had recovered became bathed in soft golden light. The heat of the day was slowly fading, replaced by the coolness of evening that stretched across the wide open desert. Jake, now feeling stronger after the care of Naeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala, sat on the blankets they had laid for him. Though his body still ached, the sharp pain from his wounds had lessened, and he was finally able to sit upright for a longer period of time. The women gathered around him, quietly preparing for the evening. There was a sense of calm in the air, a pause in the chaos that had defined the previous day. Naeli, the young woman Jake had saved, moved closer to him with a small cup of water. "Drink this," she said softly, her voice steady but gentle. Jake took the cup with trembling hands and sipped the cool water, feeling it slide down his throat and revive his tired body. He looked up at her, seeing not only the concern in her eyes but also a quiet strength that seemed far beyond her years. She had risked her life to save him, and now she continued to watch over him with patience and care. As the evening progressed, Ahioka began arranging herbs and small pieces of dried meat over a flat stone. "We will eat soon," she said. "You need your strength." Her hands moved quickly and efficiently, and Jake watched, fascinated, as she prepared a simple yet nourishing meal. Despite the simplicity, there was a beauty to her actions, a rhythm and precision born of years of experience in surviving the harsh desert. Zitkala, the youngest of the three women, gathered firewood for a small flame outside the cave. She returned moments later, lighting the fire with careful attention, making sure the smoke would not give away their location. The three women moved together with silent understanding, each action purposeful, showing that they had worked as a team long before Jake had arrived. When the meal was ready, they sat around the fire, the flames casting flickering shadows across their faces. The air was quiet, except for the occasional crackle of the fire and the distant call of a desert bird settling in for the night. Jake felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Surrounded by these women, he realized how rare it was to find people so brave, so capable, and yet so caring. He took a small bite of the food, the flavors simple but filling. As he ate, he noticed the women watching him closely, their expressions alert but kind. After the meal, Naeli spoke, her voice calm and steady. "We have lived in this desert our entire lives. It is beautiful, but it is also dangerous. We have learned to survive in ways others might not understand." Her eyes met Jake's, and he saw in them a mixture of pride, sorrow, and resilience. She began to tell him about her village, nestled in a small valley far from the main trails. The people there lived closely with the land, respecting the desert and learning its secrets. "We know where water can be found, even in the driest times," she said. "We know which plants can heal and which animals to avoid. The desert tests us every day, but it also teaches us to be strong." Ahioka added her voice, describing the knowledge passed down from their mother. "Our mother taught us the ways of healing," she explained. "She showed us which herbs could stop bleeding, which roots could ease pain, and how to treat injuries like yours. This knowledge has saved many lives, and now it helps us save yours." Jake listened intently, amazed at the depth of understanding the women had of their environment. Their skill was not learned in books, but in living closely with the land, observing it, and respecting it. Zitkala spoke next, her voice soft but firm. "We also know how to move through the desert without being seen. We can follow tracks, find hidden paths, and avoid danger. It is not only strength that keeps us alive, it is knowledge, observation, and trust in each other." Jake nodded slowly, realizing that their abilities were far greater than mere survival skills. They represented a way of life, a deep connection to the world around them that he had never experienced. As the stars began to fill the night sky, Jake felt a profound respect for the three women. Their stories were filled with courage, resilience, and intelligence. He realized that he had been wrong to think of survival in the desert as a solitary endeavor. True survival required understanding, cooperation, and the willingness to trust others. These women had not only saved his life physically, but had also opened his eyes to a new way of seeing the world. He asked naively, "Have you always lived here? Have you always faced danger like this?" Naili nodded. "Yes. From the time I could walk, I learned to be aware of the dangers around me. Bandits, wild animals, storms, they are all part of life here. We do not fear the desert, we respect it, and in return, it allows us to live." Jake felt a mixture of admiration and humility. He had traveled far and faced dangers, but he realized that these women had lived with challenges every day, and they had thrived because of their courage and wisdom. The conversation turned to more personal stories. Naili shared a memory of being captured by bandits in her youth, and how she had escaped through the desert using nothing but her knowledge and determination. Ahioka spoke of treating injured travelers who had found themselves lost or hurt, using her mother's teachings to save them. Zitkala recounted her adventures tracking animals and finding water sources that seemed impossible to reach. Each story revealed not only bravery, but also intelligence and resourcefulness. Jake realized that these women, who might appear delicate to an outsider, were among the strongest people he had ever met. As the night deepened, Jake felt a sense of connection he had rarely experienced. The desert, which had once seemed lonely and dangerous, now felt alive with lessons and opportunities for growth. He realized that the three women had not only protected him, but had also become his teachers, guiding him through a world he had only ever understood superficially. He listened as they spoke, absorbing every detail, every lesson, and every word of wisdom. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows across the cave walls. Jake looked at Naili, Ahioka, and Zitkala, feeling a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. They had risked themselves to save him, and in doing so had shown him the strength of courage, knowledge, and trust. He began to understand that bravery was not just about facing danger. It was about making decisions that could save lives, about acting with wisdom and care, and about being willing to protect others even when it was difficult. Hours passed as they shared more stories, and Jake realized that he was learning something far more important than survival skills. He was learning about humanity, about resilience, and about the power of working together. The bond between the three women was clear. They relied on each other, trusted each other, and supported one another in ways that made them stronger than any danger they faced. Jake felt privileged to witness this, and he knew that their guidance would shape him for the rest of his journey. Finally, as the night grew quiet and the stars shone brightly above, Jake felt his eyelids grow heavy. The events of the day, the struggles he had faced, and the stories he had heard weighed on his mind, and sleep became inevitable. Naili gently covered him with a blanket, ensuring he was comfortable, while Ahioka and Zitkala remained vigilant at the cave entrance. Jake drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, feeling safe for the first time in a long while. He dreamed not of the bandits or his injuries, but of the desert itself, the endless sands, the hidden paths, and the strength of those who called it home. He felt the courage of the three women as if it were his own, and he understood that his journey was not just about surviving the desert, but about learning from it, respecting it, and embracing the lessons it offered. When he woke the next morning, Jake felt renewed. His body was still healing, but his mind was sharper, filled with understanding and respect for Naili, Ahioka, and Zitkala. He knew that the desert had more challenges ahead, and he felt ready to face them with the guidance of the three remarkable women who had become his protectors, teachers, and friends. The night had shown him something he had never truly appreciated. Strength was not only measured in courage or skill, but in knowledge, trust, and the bonds formed between people. And in that quiet desert cave under the wide open sky, Jake Carter realized that he had found something far more valuable than survival. He had found connection, understanding, and the promise of true partnership in the most unexpected of places. The next morning, the desert was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The wind had settled, leaving the sand still and the sun rising slowly, casting long shadows across the landscape. Jake Carter had recovered enough to sit upright and even walk short distances, though every movement reminded him of the 5 deep wounds he had suffered. He stretched cautiously, testing his strength, and felt the sharp ache of healing cuts along his torso. Despite the lingering pain, a sense of determination filled him. He could no longer afford to remain passive. He had to regain his full strength and prepare for what the desert might throw at him next. The 3 Apache women, Nayeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala, watched him closely. Their eyes were alert, scanning the horizon and the paths leading to the cave. Jake noticed their vigilance and realized that danger was far from over. The bandits who had attacked him might still be nearby, searching for any sign of survivors. He had survived their initial assault, but the desert was vast and threats could appear at any moment. Trusting the women completely, he turned to Nayeli and asked quietly, "Do you think they might come back?" Nayeli's expression hardened. "It is possible," she said. Bandits rarely give up when they fail. They may search the area until they think no one survived. That is why we must be cautious. You are not strong enough yet to face them alone, and even I cannot guarantee safety if we act carelessly. Her tone was calm, but the seriousness of her words sent a shiver through Jake. He realized that his life depended not just on his own courage, but on listening to these women and following their guidance. Ahioka stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder. "We will help you," she said. "But you must learn to move with us, to understand the land as we do, and to trust what we teach you. Only then can you survive, and only then can we face any danger together." Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had led and protected others for years. Jake nodded, feeling both humility and determination. He had always been a lone traveler, relying on his own instincts and strength, but now he understood that alone, he was vulnerable. With the women's guidance, he could become stronger, not just physically but in knowledge and awareness. The morning passed with careful preparation. Nayeli and Ahioka showed Jake how to move silently across the sand, how to place his feet to avoid leaving tracks that could be followed, and how to identify signs of danger in the desert. Zitkala demonstrated how to read the land for water sources, shelter, and safe paths. Each lesson was practical, grounded in experience, and essential for survival. Jake absorbed everything eagerly, realizing that the skills he had relied on in the past were limited. The desert demanded more than courage. It demanded intelligence, patience, and trust in those who understood it. As the sun climbed higher, the women discussed a plan. "The bandits may come again at any time," Nayeli said. "We must be ready and we must make sure they cannot catch us off guard. If they do, it could be fatal." Ahioka nodded. "We can use the terrain to our advantage. There are hidden paths, traps, and areas where we can observe without being seen. If we work together, we can outsmart them without fighting directly." Zitkala added, "It will require coordination. Every movement must be deliberate and we must trust each other completely. There can be no mistakes." Jake listened carefully, realizing the depth of strategy involved. He had faced bandits before, relying on speed, skill with a weapon, and luck, but this approach was different. It required thinking ahead, using the land itself as a tool, and understanding that survival was as much about brains as it was about brawn. He felt a growing respect for the women, recognizing that their strength lay not just in courage, but in intelligence and experience honed by years of living in the desert. The rest of the day was spent in careful preparation. The women showed Jake how to set up simple traps to alert them if anyone approached, using natural materials from the desert. They taught him how to camouflage himself and move quietly, blending into the landscape. They also emphasized the importance of communication, developing subtle signals that could convey warnings without revealing their position. Jake practiced these techniques tirelessly, realizing that every small detail could mean the difference between life and death. As evening approached, the sky turning shades of orange and pink, Jake began to understand the power of teamwork. The three women worked seamlessly, each complementing the other's strengths. Naomi was sharp and quick-thinking, always analyzing the situation and anticipating danger. Ahioka was steady and methodical, providing calm guidance and practical solutions. Zitkala was alert and observant, noticing things that others might miss, and moving with incredible speed and precision. Together, they formed a unit far more effective than any individual, and Jake realized that his survival now depended on becoming part of that unit. Night fell and the desert was alive with subtle sounds, the distant call of coyotes, the rustle of small animals, and the whisper of the wind across the sand. Jake sat with the women outside the cave, discussing the plan for the potential return of the bandits. "If they come, we must lead them away from the cave," Naomi said. "We will use the terrain to confuse them, separate them, and force them to retreat without harming anyone unnecessarily. Violence is not always the answer." Jake nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. He realized that true courage was not about fighting blindly, but about using skill, knowledge, and strategy to protect life. The night was long, filled with careful observation and occasional practice. Jake tested his newly learned skills, moving quietly across the desert and observing the subtle changes in the landscape. He learned to spot footprints, notice the behavior of animals, and predict where danger might come from. The three women guided him patiently, correcting mistakes and reinforcing lessons. For the first time, Jake felt a sense of belonging and purpose that went beyond survival. He was part of a team, part of a carefully planned strategy, and he could feel his confidence growing with each passing hour. Hours passed, and the desert remained calm, yet the tension was never far from their minds. The women never let their guard down, and Jake learned the importance of constant awareness. He realized that the desert was not just a place of physical challenges, but a place that tested mental strength, patience, and trust. By observing and learning, he was becoming more than a survivor. He was becoming a thoughtful, prepared, and capable traveler, guided by the wisdom of those who knew the land intimately. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, the desert began to stir with the faint sounds of movement in the distance. Jake's heart raced as he saw shadows on the horizon. The bandits had returned. But this time, Jake did not feel fear. He felt prepared. He had learned to trust the women, to follow their guidance, and to rely on strategy rather than instinct alone. The three Apache women stood beside him, calm and focused, ready to lead him through whatever danger lay ahead. Together, they moved quietly across the desert, using the terrain to their advantage. The bandits approached, unaware of the careful planning and preparation that awaited them. Jake followed the signals from the women, moving with precision and patience. They led the bandits on a path that separated them, confusing them and forcing them to retreat without a direct confrontation. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated. The desert became their ally, and the women's knowledge transformed it from a place of danger into a tool for survival. By dawn, the bandits had given up and disappeared into the distance, leaving Jake and the women standing in the quiet desert. Jake felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. He looked at Naomi, Ahioka, and Zitkala, realizing that he had been part of something far greater than a struggle for survival. He had witnessed courage, intelligence, and unity in action. He had learned that survival depended not just on strength, but on strategy, trust, and cooperation. As the sun rose fully over the desert, casting golden light across the sand, Jake felt a deep appreciation for the lessons he had learned. Naomi smiled softly, Ahioka nodded in quiet approval, and Zitkala's eyes shone with pride. Jake knew that he had been changed by this experience. He had come to the desert alone, relying on his own strength, but he would leave with the understanding that true courage was shared, and that trust and teamwork could overcome even the most dangerous challenges. The desert, once a place of isolation and risk, had become a classroom, a proving ground and a home of sorts. Jake Carter had faced death, recovered under the care of 3 extraordinary women, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to the land and the people who called it home. And as they walked back to their hidden cave, ready to rest and plan the next part of their journey, Jake felt certain that he was ready for whatever came next, knowing that he would never face it alone. The desert was quiet in the early hours of the morning, the air cool and still. Jake Carter had slept little, his mind alert despite the exhaustion of the previous days. His body was stronger now, healed enough to walk and ride without constant pain, but he knew that the true challenge was still ahead. The bandits who had attacked him before could return at any time, and the women had made it clear that caution was still necessary. Yet, for the first time, Jake did not feel helpless. He had learned from Naeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala how to move through the desert silently, how to observe, and how to anticipate danger. He had learned that strength was more than physical courage. It was knowledge, strategy, and trust in others. The 3 women gathered him near the cave's entrance, each with a serious but calm expression. Naeli, standing closest to Jake, whispered, "We will face them today, but we will not fight blindly. We will make sure they leave without harming anyone. Stay close, follow our signals, and trust us." Her eyes met Jake's, and he nodded, understanding that the plan was not only to survive but to protect, to outsmart, and to end the threat without unnecessary bloodshed. Ahioka took the lead, pointing toward a narrow valley beyond the rocks. "We will lead the bandits here," she said. "The terrain will favor us. From this position, we can observe, control, and guide them without risking ourselves unnecessarily. Every movement must be deliberate." Zitkala checked the surrounding paths, ensuring that no other danger was approaching. The 3 women moved with quiet confidence, their experience in the desert evident in every gesture. Jake felt a surge of admiration. They had survived in this harsh land for years, and now he could see why. They combined skill, courage, and intelligence in a way that made them nearly unstoppable. The sun rose higher, painting the desert in gold and amber. Soon, faint shapes appeared on the horizon. The bandits had returned, searching for survivors. Jake's heart raced, but he remembered the lessons of the past days. He moved silently, matching the women's steps, blending into the landscape as they had taught him. The bandits approached unaware of the careful plan laid before them. Jake could see their confusion as they followed paths that seemed familiar, but were carefully designed to mislead them. The desert itself had become their ally, and the women had transformed it into a tool to protect life rather than a place of danger. The bandits entered the narrow valley, and the women signaled Jake to stay low behind a cluster of rocks. Naeli's hand moved subtly, pointing to paths where the bandits should go, directing their movement without a word. Ahioka and Zitkala positioned themselves strategically, ensuring that the bandits could be observed from multiple angles. Jake felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, he was part of something larger than himself, a carefully coordinated effort where every action mattered. He understood the importance of patience, observation, and timing. Hours passed as the bandits wandered through the valley, confused by the shifting paths and the clever tricks laid out by the women. Rocks had been stacked to create false trails, footprints misdirected, and the terrain used to obscure movement. Jake marveled at the women's planning and skill. He realized that the desert was not just a place of hardship, it was a partner for those who knew it well, and these women knew it better than anyone he had ever met. By mid-morning, the bandits had begun to show signs of frustration. They were tired, disoriented, and unable to find any sign of their intended targets. Jake watched as Naeli, Ahioka and Zitkala communicated silently, their subtle gestures guiding the bandits further away from the cave and into paths that would force them to retreat. Jake's heart swelled with admiration and gratitude. He had survived by relying on them, and he could see that their lives had been dedicated to protecting not only themselves but anyone in need. Eventually, the bandits realized that they had been outsmarted. Frustration turned to fear as they saw themselves trapped in an unfamiliar landscape, unable to find a way forward without risk. They turned back, retreating into the desert from which they had come. Jake, standing with the three women, felt an immense relief wash over him. The threat had been neutralized without a single fatal confrontation, thanks to careful planning, strategy, and unity. The women's wisdom had saved countless lives, including his own. As the bandits disappeared into the distance, Naeli turned to Jake and spoke quietly. "You see now that strength is not only about fighting. It is about understanding, planning, and working together. That is how we survive in the desert." Jake nodded, realizing the depth of her words. He had come to the desert thinking that survival depended on courage alone, but he now understood that courage without strategy could be dangerous. True bravery was thoughtful, deliberate, and guided by knowledge. Ahioka added, "The desert teaches lessons to those who pay attention. It teaches patience, resilience, and respect. We have lived by those lessons every day. You have learned them too in your own way." Jake felt humbled. He had entered the desert alone, relying on his instincts, but the women had shown him a better way, one that combined courage with wisdom, independence with cooperation, and strength with humility. Zitkala, smiling faintly, said, "You have learned quickly, Jake. You are no longer alone. You understand what it means to work with others, to observe, and to respect the land." Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that the women had given him more than physical protection. They had given him knowledge, perspective, and trust. He was no longer just a lone traveler in the desert. He was part of a bond forged through courage, care, and shared experience. The three women led Jake back to the hidden cave, where they settled down to rest after the tense morning. The desert sun shone warmly, highlighting the beauty of the land that had challenged and tested them all. Jake looked at the women, realizing that their strength was not only in their skills but in their unity, courage, and wisdom. They had faced danger and emerged victorious, not by fighting recklessly but by thinking carefully, acting strategically, and trusting each other completely. As the day passed, Jake reflected on the events of the past week. He thought about the bandits, the wounds he had received, and the three women who had saved him. He realized that his journey had been transformed. He had arrived in the desert as a solitary cowboy, relying on his own courage and instincts, but he would leave changed. He had learned lessons about trust, strategy, resilience, and respect that would stay with him forever. By evening, the desert was bathed in the golden light of sunset, and Jake sat quietly with Naeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala. The three women had become more than protectors. They were teachers, guides, and friends. Jake understood that the desert had brought them together for a reason. He had faced death, been cared for, and learned to trust fully. In doing so, he had discovered the power of knowledge, strategy, and cooperation in the harshest of environments. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast desert sky, Jake felt a sense of peace he had not known before. The bandits were gone, the immediate danger had passed, and he had survived not by luck, but by the wisdom and courage of the three extraordinary women who had stood by him. Naeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala were a reminder that true strength was often found in unexpected places, and that life's greatest challenges could be overcome with patience, skill, and unity. In the quiet of the desert night, Jake realized that he had been given a gift beyond survival. He had been shown how to see the world differently, to understand the land, and to appreciate the courage and intelligence of others. The lessons he had learned would guide him for the rest of his life, shaping not only the way he traveled but the way he lived. When dawn came the next day, Jake prepared to continue his journey, feeling stronger and wiser than before. He mounted his horse and looked back at the three women standing near the cave, their silhouettes strong against the rising sun. Naeli, Ahioka, and Zitkala had not only saved his life, but had taught him invaluable lessons about courage, trust, and survival. Jake tipped his hat in gratitude, knowing that he would carry the memory of these extraordinary women and their wisdom with him forever. The desert stretched out before him, vast and challenging, but Jake no longer feared it. He had faced danger, recovered from near death, and learned to trust and work with others. The lessons of the desert and the courage of the three Apache women had transformed him. As he rode into the horizon, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that survival was not just about living through challenges, but about learning from them, respecting others, and finding strength in unity. And so, the story of Jake Carter, the lone cowboy who had taken 5 stabs to save a young Apache woman, ended not with tragedy or loss, but with wisdom, friendship, and an enduring respect for the strength found in courage, knowledge, and human connection. The desert, once a place of isolation and danger, had become a place of growth, understanding, and unexpected alliance, a place where life's harshest lessons had been transformed into lasting strength.